The Fairy Whispering podcast explores the multisensory pathways to connect with the other world, such as listening to messages in owls' hoots, singing to mermaids in a moonlit cove, or knowing what to give a gnome when they come to dinner. I'm Claire Casely, a fairy whisperer and researcher. Take my hand and I'll guide you safely through the enchanted twilight woodland where they are waiting to meet you. Hi, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. I'm Claire Casely and I'm really moved and excited to have a wonderful guest with me today, Jeremy Garner. And I've followed Jeremy's work for a few years now, since at least about 2016. And Jeremy is an author. He's a musician, a teacher, and a traveller of the hidden realms, bringing information and creations to this world from other dimensions. He's been teaching how to connect with the fairy realm since 2015. And through a collection of free online courses, he has released a wealth of knowledge and information for the purpose of assisting people in connecting to fairies. In 2019, he released his first book entitled Faerie Magic, which contains a variety of both theoretical and practical techniques for communicating with their worlds. And this was soon followed by his elemental volumes, Fire, Air, Water and Earth together, which record a first-hand account of a 40-day journey through the Faerie Worlds. And in 2022, he released his book of Hermes, Volume 1, and a book entitled Guide to Faerie Land, which compiles all of his courses available on his website, along with much more information than what is available on his website. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you so much, Claire. Appreciate it.
And part of our connection, which the reason we've come together today, and I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time. It's just the ways haven't come together. Is because you saw my interview with Joe Hickey Hall on Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, where I was talking about having done your course, the 12-day Clairvoyance course, which was so powerful, which I started in 2019. And as part of that experience, I went on some very deep journeys, connecting with the fairy realm, connecting with the guides. And one of the journeys, I was shown a rune, and it's the rune Dagaz. And I was talking with Joe about my experience of encountering this rune in a dream. It was a fairy dream. And then the next day, my son had this symbol on his forehead. He woke up with this symbol on his, sort of imprinted on his forehead. It's faded now. It wasn't a permanent thing. And then going to a park and finding a fairy door with, very similar symbol on the door, and just lots of amazing experiences that came from doing those practices that you were teaching, and finding that there was no dividing line between my waking reality and the dream world, which is the real world. So we agreed that we'd start, because of that, we'd start talking about runes and the Dagaz rune and your knowledge of the Dagaz rune and how you've been working with it. So
I was truly astounded to see that interview. It caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting to hear you mention the courses. And then when I heard you start talking about that rune, it immediately stood out to me because that rune, it was actually in that same year, 2019, when you were tapping in, that I received that rune in connection with as sort of a doorway into the fairy realms. And it contained the knowledge of the order of these worlds from fire to air to water to earth. And it was a particular order that led to me going on this 40-day journey through the different realms, which is how I've written the elemental books. And that symbol became very prominent to me. And so the fact that you had seen that specifically, I knew immediately that you had found the same key. And especially to have that on your son's forehead and found on the tree as well. Was that the same day as well that you found that on the tree, or was that?
Yeah,
It
it
was.
was.
Oh
It's
wow, that's
all
amazing.
the same
Yeah,
day. Yeah, it was
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
and you had seen you had actually seen it in the fairy worlds first, the
Yeah.
symbol as
Mm,
well.
hmm.
Had that been on your forehead at the time, or had somebody had touched your forehead? Was it
Yes.
something like that?
Yeah. So what happened
Mm-hmm.
was, my
Mm-hmm.
fairy guide. So it's one of those liminal dreams at dawn.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
waking, but I was asleep. A very vivid dream. And my fairy guide took me into a tree through a fairy door, and on the door there was this symbol that I get,
Wow.
which I
Yeah.
didn't know what it was at the time,
Mm.
until I looked it up the next day. And then, oh no, I showed it online and somebody said, oh, that's the Dagaz
Yeah.
rune.
Mm-hmm.
So we went into the tree, and there are lots of fairy people
Mm-hmm.
there of all different types. And my fairy guide said, right, it's now time, because it's like a series of initiations, these journeys.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So she said, it's time to awaken your brow chakras. And she explained that we've got several brow chakras, and it's about five brow chakras. And she drew this rune on my forehead to awaken these chakras.
Wow.
And they all
Wow.
started to light up.
Mm-hmm.
So it was after,
Amazing. Amazing.
yeah, it was incredible. And then
Mm.
it's only subsequently I found out that this rune represents the dawn and awakening.
Right, right. So it
Yeah,
must have been quite a shock to see that on your son's forehead. And you showed me the
yeah,
picture, and I have to say, I mean, it's not just it's not a coincidence, and it's certainly it's not difficult to comprehend how real this is. Like the symbol is drawn very clearly on the forehead, and it
mm,
looked almost as if it was sort of risen up from beneath. Almost, I've actually received several
mm,
scratches from these beings, and it can actually look quite similar, almost as if it's almost being burned or etched into the skin
yeah,
temporarily.
yeah,
And so that was amazing to see that, and especially being there of all places, just connecting to the vision and everything. So
mm,
that was very, very amazing to see that, and it's been further confirming from my experiences as well. On my Book
mm.
of Earth, I actually well, actually, I should show the symbol first from the Book of Fire. I think it's in here so that it's clear. It looks almost like butterfly wings.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
but it's
Oh,
usually like this.
wow.
It's usually sort of this
Mm-hmm,
way. And I think of
mm,
it similar to an hourglass as well when it's like this. But I have tilted
mm.
it to be like the butterfly wings, and I've put the Aries astrological symbol here as the feelers of the butterfly.
Oh,
And
wow.
these are all very symbolic of the beginning of the fire realms, which is over here, fire.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you travel down to the air world, you travel up here to the water world and across here to the earth world. And that creates this other rune, which is the Iwas rune. I don't know how to
I
pronounce any of
was.
these, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I was. Yeah.
But
Mm.
yes, but on here I have the red up here symbolizing the fire, and
Mm.
down here I have white for air, and over
Mm.
here is blue for water, and here is black or purple for earth. And so if you trace a line between those in that particular order and back to fire, it actually creates that Dagaz rune. And I
Right.
put
Oh
that
my
there as
gosh.
a kind of invisible doorway into that, because this was a very, very prominent um, entry point, revealing the way into this realm. And up until even the late 90s, this particular order has been concealed from the general public, because it's
Right.
usually, it tends to have been the idea of spring, summer, autumn, winter, or air, fire, water, earth. And while I was writing Faerie Magic in 2019, I discovered this other particular order that had been sort of hidden, and that this was a sort of hidden doorway. It's also on the Wheel of Fortune tarot card, and you can see like this symbol here over by the letter A is the alchemical symbol for sulfur or fire, and this one here is the symbol for Mercury. It's quite hard to see here. Hermes or Mercury, which is connected to the air. And then here you've got the water symbol, like Aquarius. And over here, this is the alchemical symbol for salt of the earth. So it's fire, air, water, earth upon there as well. And the entryway is basically where the arrow of sulfur is pointing through this entry point into the fire worlds. And so that's the order, that's the reason I wrote the books as fire, air, water, earth. And yeah, it's a lot about twist, because even when you turn this Roman numeral X this way, you sort of got the Dagaz rune again. But yeah, it's quite interesting. It sort of opened the door for me into the fairy realms, and so it gave me the order of which to explore them, and from there I was able to go on that 40-day journey that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, because now you've said that, and now I have that information, I'm going to look back through my journals and, you know, I will notice those elements now because I did encounter those elements during those journeys.
Oh, wow.
When I first met my fairy guides, I was traveling across a river. It was like, you know, this classic symbolism of traveling across like the river of Styx with a boatman. You know, a hooded boatman that was taking me over to this mound where this woman was, you know, so and it was really primordial sort of setting. And I think you
did you
said
see
something
any
about that.
gate there, any large gate where you were there at all, or any kind of
Yeah, so my guide took me to the top of this mound, and the mound opened, and this blue light came out of the top of it, and we went down. So that was the gateway. We went down into it.
Okay. Yep.
And it's only since then that I've learned that people have had sightings of blue light coming from mounds in ancient places. Yeah.
I was only asking because there's sort of two sides you can enter from, and I was trying to figure out whether you were over at the earth side or over at the fire side, because the fact that you mentioned the river Styx, that's closer over to the earth side, which is interesting. And I think possibly Thomas Reimer and those beings went that way because it talks of them wading through a river of blood before they get into the realm. So it was almost a darker realm, whereas I've taken the other direction, which is sort of backwards. And I don't know why that is. When I was writing all of my experiences, I was starting at the very back of the book and writing the whole thing backwards. And I don't know why I ever did that, but I worked backwards with everything. So it's opened up some interesting doors.
So what was the way? How did this all start with these books being written? Your fairy journey. What was the gateway for you into exploring these realms?
To go all the way back, I had an experience meeting the Fairy Queen in 2010 in a very clear dream experience, and it came quite out of the blue because I wasn't particularly connected to fairies prior to that I was aware of. And even after that experience, and she told me various things at that point, that these things did not unfold for me for several years after that. But I was aware of a connection to them from that moment onwards. And I could never forget it. It just got etched in my heart the moment I had that experience. But it wasn't until around sort of late 2012 that I started to I found that book, The Fairy Way, and so I started to practice the exercises in that book, and very soon I started to have very, very real experiences, which sort of led to me creating those courses, the 8-week Beginner's Guide to Fairyland course, later the course on Clairvoyance, and it wasn't until all the way through to 2019 that I started writing Faerie Magic, and it was during the writing of that that I was actually practicing while I was writing, like I was sort of learning it while writing it rather than learning it first and then writing it. So because of that, by the time I'd finished that book, I had discovered that particular order. And so then I knew I have to travel to the worlds in that particular order. And at this point, I'd already been traveling to the fairy realms and I knew that they were divided into these different seasons. But once I understood this formula, I realized that there's a sort of magical formula to unlock information to come through. So this is why I did it. But yeah, all of this out of context has been, more than a decade of information. It will sound probably quite confusing to hear all of this out of context, because it's just been such a journey to get to this point, and it's hard to
Yeah,
go all the way back and unravel it
yeah,
all. But
yeah,
yeah.
I know. I totally understand. And
Mm,
I know we were saying won't be about, I think I said, these things take time in our realm
mm,
to for us to realize what they mean. It's like
that's
that
right. Yeah.
example with this rune, and then
Mm,
you having a few years later
yeah.
seeing that interview I did, and realizing,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I didn't, and then you coming back to me with more information.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just amazing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
How it all
That's when I
works.
realized, we are accessing the same realm, we're accessing the same
Mm,
information. And it's very confirming to see that. I have spoken to other people that have very visually gone to the exact same locations, can describe exactly things that I've never even written into the books that I've just kept
mm,
inside, and I've talked about them. And it's like they can navigate the same realms. It's a very real location.
mm.
Um, and after writing the four elemental books, I discovered Bernard Sleigh's ancient map of Fairyland, and I had never even heard of this before.
Oh,
Have you seen it?
I had a look at your website and I thought,
Oh, you
oh,
did.
I
Right,
saw the
right.
fairy
Yes,
map. I haven't had a chance
right.
to explore it yet, but it
Oh,
really
you'll be
interests
amazed.
me. Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Show
no, you're
me
right. The map.
Fairyland. Mm.
So it will amaze you because I know that you've had many visual experiences and you've been traveling these fairy realms for some time. So I'm sure you'll be quite as amazed when you take a closer look at the map, and you'll probably realize that some of the places you've been to are actually there. And this is what tripped me out, is the
Wow.
fact that I had just written these books, Fire, Air, Water, Earth, in that order. And then I began to discover that everywhere I had just been, word for word, was all upon the map, to the point where I could navigate it immediately and go, oh, I know that something's going to be over here. I'm looking for, like, oh, I met this being here. So where's he? I know he's over here somewhere. And then here he would appear. So it was like the whole map basically had my entire journey, the whole 40-day journey upon it. And I can actually mark out all of the whole journey, like where it all fits. And it's absolutely amazing. And yeah, he put the exact same order of the fire, air, water, earth, starting over from the right side and going across to the left. And that's why it sort of has a darker shade over here and then a lighter over here.
Wow.
And if you actually look at all of the fairy tales that he's put upon there, um, he's basically chosen them very specifically to represent the different elements. So over to the right, where you've got the south beacon, all of the fairy tales and stories that he references in that area are all based on fire realms. And if you look them up, they'll all be to do with the desert or the fire or whatever. And the same goes along the way. So I'm doing a very deep study of all of that at the moment. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's got endless things to discover in that map. It's an
Uh,
absolutely eternal search in there.
I can't
Yeah.
wait to look at that because
Mm. Yeah.
the places I went journey to or have journeyed to
Mm.
are, like you say, they're just very vividly real. I've been
Yeah.
to caverns under the earth. I've been
Yeah.
to
Oh wow.
beautiful
Yeah.
meadows, surrounded
Yep.
by mountains and
Mm-hmm.
lakes and
Yep.
all these amazing
Yeah.
places. And then I
Yeah.
accessed like in meditation, I've accessed places through real places that I know that have been
Mhm.
shown to me as gateways into the fairy realm.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
locally, and then I've realized that there are places that I've seen in those journeys that are real places that I can't
Yeah.
get to easily, but I know I have to go to. So
Right. Right.
recently, yeah, in one of those journeys, I mean, this is about you, not about
No,
me,
no,
but
no.
you might find it
I'd like to hear
interesting.
both. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in one of these journeys, I entered the fairy realm through a river on Dartmoor,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it was autumn time actually, because I've written down the seasons as well. And then I went through the sea, but it's like an energetic sea with the
Hmm.
mermaids,
Hmm.
and came up on a beach, and it was just
Wow.
really white cliffs, really
I
white
was just gonna
cliffs,
say white sand. Was there white sand?
white
Because
sand,
yeah,
yeah, white
white
cliffs.
sand, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And my guide was waiting for me. And
Wow.
then in May, like, so I've started to travel to meet with people when I can. And there was a woman that I went to interview and spend time in her garden who has fairy
Hmm.
experiences in her garden. I'm going to release in the autumn those episodes. And it's in Sussex. And in
Hmm.
Sussex, there's some cliffs called the Seven Sisters. And
Mm.
they are like seven bumps in the land that form these seven sisters as cliffs. And in the cliffs, there are these, they're chalk cliffs, but there are some entrance ways that look like doorways.
Wow. Wow.
Because, yeah,
Is that, I'm trying to think because I feel like I wrote something about that in here, but I don't know if it was the Seven Sisters. Oh yeah, it does say the Seven Sisters here. Well, is that connected
oh,
to the Pleiades? Or
I think it
I
might
wonder.
be. It's one of those things where, I feel it is. I feel
Hmm.
that's where it comes from. But
Right.
the information, the local information on the area says the very sort of
Hmm.
mundane explanation that it's just seven bumps that represent it's just called the Seven Sisters, but I feel it's got
I
a
don't know if
more
the one that I
magical
was seeing
connection.
was to
Yeah.
do with, yeah. I'm not sure if the one I saw was to do with Ireland or if, because where are you based? Is it, that's not in, you're not in Ireland, are you?
No, I'm in England. So
In England.
yeah, I live in Devon, and
Oh, I'm
Sussex
talking, yeah,
is up
Cleft
the
of the
south
Seven
coast.
is what it is. So there's a different one
Ah,
called Cleft of the Seven, and perhaps that's in Ireland. But yeah, this necklace here has the seven stars around it as well, which are the seven sisters. And
oh,
this was
mm,
told in the fairy realms. They told me to create this talisman to have this created. Um,
wow.
and so the seven sisters are very connected to the fairy realms. My whole
Mm,
journey finished on the day when the Pleiades constellation basically arises in the sky in New Zealand. So that's the day
mhm.
that the journey ended. And that's the same day that I received this talisman with the seven stars around it. So the Pleiades and the Seven Sisters are all very, very connected to the fairy realms as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Mm.
got chills. Yeah, because
Mm. Yeah.
connections to them as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, through a
Wow.
past life. That
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody said, "Oh, you used to be a priestess at
Oh, wow.
Dodona in
Mm.
Greece,"
Mm.
and
Wow.
their connection is the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters.
Amazing. Wow.
So yeah, so I get chills talking about it.
Yeah. There's many
It's just
connections. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And it's interesting about your talisman as well that so
Hmm.
this is a fairy gift because I've
Yes. Yeah.
received fairy gifts that are both given to me in that realm or
Mm.
received from people in this realm.
Hmm.
So would you say that it's a good idea to get these gifts created in this realm if they or try and
Yeah,
yeah.
if there's guidance to do this. In my
Mm,
case, while I was writing the Book of Fire, I was writing about French connections to Faerie Land, and I was also writing about metalwork and horseshoes and things like this. And at the same time that I was writing this, I received an email from somebody I'd never heard from before, and he said, "Hi, I'm a French metal caster. If you ever need anything made out of metal, I'm your guy." So I was like, wow, like I was like, you have no idea. I was just writing about like French connections to fairies and metal and all of this. And I said, this is
mm,
unbelievable, but I don't actually have anything I need made right now. And he says, you'll remember if you need anything. And then I went through the whole journey through the air world, the fire world, the water world. And when I was in the water realms, I met with a wizard there. and he was telling me, you're going to have to create this talisman. And he says he gave me the instructions of it with the 7 stars around it. It goes back to a thing that's in actually one of Agrippa's Celestial Magic books, and so it has the symbol on the back of it is also. It's probably hard to see here, but this is also
Oh, look
connected
at
to the
that.
Pleiades, and there are 3 gems in there, and in the center there's also the Virgin.
Ah,
And so
wow.
this was
Yeah.
a talisman that is basically written in that book as it said if you were to wear it and if you were to, it would raise great windstorms and it would connect you to spirits that would give you access to uncanny knowledge. So I had forgotten the windstorm part. I just remembered about the knowledge. And so I received it on the same day as the Pleiades and I put it around my neck. All of a sudden, the biggest windstorms
Yeah.
that this South Island of New Zealand had ever had in a long time started up, and they were canceling flights. There were ships problems like all around the world. This was making headlines,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, the timing of it was crazy because I had not even made the connection to or remembered about the windstorms until later. And then I looked back up the effects and it was like raises great windstorms, and it was like this huge polar blast happens at this time. So that was like kind of trippy in itself. But
Yeah.
actually this was right at the end of my 40-day journey to Fairyland. So it sort of like went out with this big felt like
Mm,
this really magical time, but it all synced up at that moment.
mm,
And so it felt as if I think when I was studying other stories, again with Thomas Reimer, when he came back from a journey to Fairyland, there were said to be large storms as well. And I've read this on a few different occasions after having spent a while there. Um, and so yeah, the talisman, it started to help me to see into these other dimensions and receive information. And again, the uncanny knowledge that started to come through, which I've continued to put into the books. But
amazing,
yeah.
amazing.
Mm,
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there.
mm,
There's the connection to the wind, because
mm,
I find
mm.
when I connect with, certain places in the landscape I go out to connect with, I usually use that. It's just a very
Yeah.
sort of intuitive process where I might just sing a
Mm-hmm.
song
Yeah.
and say
Yeah.
hello to the spirits. And always when I do that, the wind picks up.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
wind
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
really
Yeah.
starts blowing,
Mm-hmm.
or talking about fairies with people, the wind tends to pick up, or asking the wind
Mm-hmm.
for information. Have you done that where you speak to the wind and the sylphs,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and receive
Yeah.
information that way?
Yeah, they
Mm,
say to turn one of your ears towards the wind and listen at a certain time. It's something to do with this. I remember reading in one of Fiona MacLeod's books, but the wind is obviously very connected to the fairy realm because I believe that fairies, as in the beings that people tend to be referring to when they say that word, are of the air element,
mm,
and I believe they tend to be more easily able to be felt or heard rather than seen, um, because just like with the wind, it's that we feel it, we can hear it, but we don't see it, and we can see it through a medium. Like if we see leaves blowing in the wind, that's a sort of a body that is created. And I believe there would also probably be a way to see fairies in a similar fashion if we used some form of medium through which to see the air currents. We wouldn't be able to see their actual forms, but you'd be
mm,
able to actually photograph um,
mm.
the way that they move and things like that. I talk about
Yes.
this one second.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, a sip of my
Yeah.
tea.
Well, I talk about this in Faerie Magic. There's a thing called the Schlieren or Schlieren effect, and it's you sort of create it with I think it's a concave mirror, a razor blade, these types of things, and it enables you to see the air currents in front of the mirror, and you can photograph them and everything.
Oh,
And so if you were to blow a hair dryer in front of it, you will actually see the air coming out. And so I believe this could be utilized in the future to
mm.
actually almost create a communication device between fairies and
Yeah.
humans.
Yes, because that's another theme that's for me coming through with, fairies being able to utilize our technology or our
Right.
technology coming to a place
Yeah.
where we can start to see these beings like,
Hmm.
one of my guests that I've spoken to, I'm going to um, share her episodes in the autumn where
Hmm.
she has cameras in her garden, like security
Wow.
cameras, and she's picked up
Hmm.
these amazing orbs.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and some of them form into little beings. So
Wow. Wow.
she's got actually got a film of a little gnome that
Wow.
that
That's
pop
amazing. Wow.
yeah, he jumps up into the
Mm.
frame and is looking up
Wow.
at the camera, and it's almost like he realizes that this is a
Wow.
camera and
Wow.
he jumps off again.
Hmm.
So
Wow. Wow. That's absolutely fascinating. I'd love to see that. That's amazing.
yeah, I'll give you her link at the end because she's got a private
Thank you.
Instagram page
Hmm.
where she's posting all of these that she's happy for me to share with
Wow.
people
Wow.
that are interested. But she doesn't want to share them on YouTube or anything,
Right.
but she
Yeah.
wants, people that are interested to be able
Yeah.
to see these
Wow.
things. So yeah, I
Wow.
will share that with you. Yeah.
Yes, in that case, I do believe that the gnomes, not that I've ever are more likely to be seen physically because they're of the earth element. So they are closer to the density of here than what I believe the
Mm.
sylphs that you were talking about are. And so for that reason, I think that they can be seen more, but through meeting them in the other realms, they have shown to me that they're absolute masters of camouflage and misdirection and disguise. So you could be looking up at the sky, see a light ship or a UFO, and they might be running right by your side, and you think that that's the thing to be looking at.
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
only as
right.
one example, because yeah, because
That's
of course
interesting. Yeah.
they're just so good at misdirection. Because of course something's going to catch your attention, and you're looking in the completely wrong direction of the things that are right next to you at these times.
Because I mean, I haven't watched the video that you've done yet for the Willerton Gnomes, but obviously that's something
Oh
that
yeah.
has had a lot of attention the last couple of years with the Investigation
Yeah,
Society.
that's right.
My
Yeah.
friend Kate Ray and other friends that have contributed to the
Yeah.
book that was about the
Mm.
Willerton Gnomes, and
Yeah,
the children saw them as if they were in little cars, but I'm wondering whether they
that's right.
interpreted spaceships. Oh, look, there was an orb that just went by you. Might have been,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
just went by. Um, yeah, whether they could have been in little spaceships, maybe. So
Well, what was interesting again with the Book of Earth when I was seeing these gnomes, and it sounds crazy, and I almost didn't even write it into the book, but this was in visions. They were actually driving around in little cars that they would pedal. And this was the thing that I actually saw, and it's a strange thing that after seeing that, that's actually what got me interested in the Wallerton Gnomes case, because
right,
I was like,
yeah.
wow, that's very interesting that they actually saw and drew these cars. And I have had a listen to the recording of these children speaking um, their experiences, and it was hard for me to discern after hearing the recording what I thought, because while the children do sound quite convincing, the headmaster to me did not as much. So it made me just wonder what the nature of this case is. I don't know what to make of it. It's a very confusing case, but I do believe that the cars is not entirely as far-fetched as it sounds.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, because like you say, with the misdirection, with the um I think they have an ability to, with their clothing and things, to show,
Absolutely. The camouflage. Yeah.
yeah, and
Mm.
perhaps to show us symbolically a form of dress or mode of
That's right.
transport as a
Yeah.
message rather than this
Yeah.
is how it actually is. Yeah.
they can be absolutely before us in plain sight quite easily. And when I was writing about them in the Book of Earth, there's actually some white text in the book itself, and when you see it, it looks as if you're looking at the words showing through the page from the other side, and you just flick through and you won't even know, but there's actually written messages that I've put there just in case anyone ever happens to just suddenly notice, hang on, there's actually some writing here and this actually says something, just to show that there can be things right in front of you while you're reading a book, even entire messages written in a very almost invisible text that can just pass you by very easily and might stumble upon it, that the gnomes can be right there and we just don't see them. And the thing is with the UFOs, I'm not saying they're necessarily using these just as forms of distraction, but they actually have many connections to the extraterrestrials, and I believe that's actually where they received a lot of their knowledge. This is something that the author of the Neverending Story, I think, was aware of when he made the gnomes be like an astrologer or an astronomer with all of the telescopes and everything. I don't think that he did that on accident. There's a clear connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in that connection between what we call extraterrestrials and
Mm.
fairies and where the
Mm.
crossover is. I mean,
Yeah, me too.
I personally feel the term ET is quite misleading because I think a lot of these beings come from another dimension and
Mm.
within the Earth dimension as well as
Right,
perhaps
I see.
coming through rather than out there from another planet, maybe, or
Right. Mm.
from another
They're both,
dimension.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's both, yeah. So
Mm.
yeah, I've had experiences with both because I've been taken up on a UFO at one point. So
Oh,
yeah, as far-fetched again as that sounds, as I know it does
no.
sound that way,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's been interesting to kind of get a view of both of these sides of things. And
Mm.
this was through a sort of a parallel dimension again. I was able to spontaneously get into this parallel dimension at that time,
Mm.
consciously induced. It happened on the rarest occasions, and it basically felt as if everything was physical, like I just physically get out of bed. And I've had many lucid dreams, astral experiences, all these things, and none of those things even come close to the realism of what this feels like. And so in that parallel dimension, that's where I met with them. And it just felt to me the same as if I was physically meeting with them, but it meant that the neighbors and so on wouldn't actually hear the same things or see the same things because it was, I believe, a parallel dimension of sorts. And so that stuck in my head for a long time, and I kept thinking, how could I utilize that state to see fairies and to communicate with fairies? And it wasn't until 2020, while I was writing the Book of Fire, that I actually not only found these particular techniques, but started to practice them. And I made a sort of deal with myself. I will not publish the Book of Fire until I know that these can work and that I've actually experienced this dimension. And I prayed to have this experience, and the very next day, while practicing those techniques, I managed to actually enter into that parallel physical dimension and go in there and
Mm.
have these experiences. And it's truly amazing. It's a whole new
Mm.
way of much more realism to access these places from that dimension.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear more about that experience.
Mm.
If you want to share
Mm.
anything about what these beings were like, or
Yeah, so the
mm,
experience itself in these dimensions are there's something that I don't share a lot about because of the nature of how
yeah,
physical that they are.
mm,
But I talk mostly, and even in the books, I only tend to write mostly the visionary trance experiences because these feel more shareable. But what I
mm,
can say about the other thing is that it's accessed through a sort of conscious type of sleepwalking. So the way to do it basically is you wait until you just start to see one of the first dream signs, like you just start to see a dream image start to appear, but you have to keep your mind somewhat conscious and aware of this, and then you physically step out of your bed. So not you're not sort of you're not in a spirit coming out, but you actually
mm,
physically step out of your bed. um, And at this point, you're in a sort of very middle, half awake, half asleep state. And then you try to jump, and the body can actually start to float, and it will come back down. Much it feels very much like being an astronaut or something like that. You can actually jump a little bit further. And if you look
Mm,
down at your legs, often they can be swelling up. And this is the whole
mm,
thing to do with hyperspace and things like this. And there's a whole section on the Lost Enchanters website where I talk about this. It's called the Jinn state. And there is information on
right.
there with a large number of techniques and practices in different
Mm,
ways to achieve this. But it's not something I would
yeah.
recommend doing too much, because it's possible that it could lead to unconscious sleepwalking, perhaps. I'm not sure. It hasn't for me, but it could under certain
Mm,
circumstances, because um, your body does not really get rested when you're doing this. It's like you can get extremely exhausted from doing it. And
mm,
when you're actually there, it's not like when you're in an astral or dream experiences where your body's resting and still getting the sleep even though you're elsewhere. It's like
mm.
you actually feel like you're somewhere else in a very physical way.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about an experience I had. It's just
Mm-hmm.
come to mind to me. Um, where I woke up one morning and, or maybe I was half asleep actually. Um, I wanted to connect with a place of echoes because
Mm-hmm.
there's a place from that I was told about as a child from my grandmother that's called the Echo Gate.
Mm-hmm.
And my father told me about it as well. And it was a place where you
Oh.
could go to and call
Mm-hmm.
over this gate, and your voice would come back to you.
Oh wow. Yeah.
But because the motorway had been built through this valley, it completely ruined the
Uh,
acoustics that were there.
I see.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, and these places were sacred to ancient people.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up one morning. I wanted to connect with this place, and I went on a journey. I decided to remote view the landscape as it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at the time when my father was a boy. And I met with my grandmother in this place, and we were calling over the gate together.
Mm-hmm.
And then this music arose from our voices coming back, the voices singing back to us. And whilst I was in this state, I decided to record this song. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a singer, so I decided to, and it was amazing. I just went into this incredible deep
Wow.
state of like a trance state where I was there singing
Wow.
this song. I came out of the experience, thought, oh, I'd like to listen back to that on my phone, which is always, you know, like voice
Yeah.
recorder. I went to listen. It was extremely difficult to hear. It was really quiet. It was like it was really far
Wow.
away
Interesting. Wow.
and muffled. And it was almost
Mm.
like I'd gone into
Mm.
this other place.
Wow. Wow. I see.
Yeah. So it
Right.
hadn't been able to
That's
record.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's very fascinating, because that would imply that you can actually take things from here into that
Mm.
run, figuring out whether this is possible, whether it's possible to take things there or bring things back. That's what I would really like to learn more about. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
very interesting that you
Yeah.
have been able to. Yeah. So that was through a form of remote viewing, but you
Remote.
felt like you were
Yeah.
physically. So you were actually
I
you were
was
walking to the location,
I was flying over. So
flying over, right?
I'd I wanted to see what the landscape was like in those
So you were
times
trying to
far away.
record while you were doing this. So
Yeah.
you're sort of in a trance and you also have
Yeah.
to record. I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I had
So
it
that does sound like a kind
beside
of,
me
yeah,
and remote
feels like it's
viewing.
sort of merging between the two dimensions at once. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
almost like,
yeah,
well, was I there? And that's why it
yeah.
didn't record
Hmm.
here.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
interesting experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
So, and there's another experience talking about talismans before we,
Mm,
um, where I went to Dartmoor a few years ago
mm,
and I was sat on a tour and I
mm-hmm,
connected with this pixie
mm-hmm.
who told me his name was Finnish. And
Finish. Mm,
and he was blowing this silver whistle behind
mm,
me, and there was a
mm,
dog running around like a
mm.
few 100 meters away from us. And the dog was obviously
Uh-huh.
hearing this whistle because it was running
Mm-hmm.
around confused, like, where's that sound coming from?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he gave me the silver whistle and said, "This is
Wow.
for you, so you can
Mm-hmm.
call us." So
Ah,
that's why I was saying
wow.
interested in your talisman that you've had made. So maybe I need to have that whistle
I
made.
see,
Or
like actually
yeah,
bring it into a
mm,
physical, because this was a spiritual experience.
yeah,
Right. Well, that's amazing.
mm,
Yeah, I would probably you could obtain that. I think sometimes, well, actually, you don't even necessarily have to have it made. It could be that you find it. That's how this ring came into to
mm,
place because I was in the jinn in the world speaking with these genie beings
yeah,
in the
mm,
fire realms, and they mentioned that I needed to get a fire ring, and they showed me a symbol that looked the same with the way that it sort of comes up the top there, and they showed it to
mm,
me in this vision. So I went to this spiritual store to try and find it, and they actually stock some of my books in that store. So I went in there and I had been wandering around and I found the ring, but I only had a certain amount of money on me and didn't have anywhere close to what it was. So I just mentioned that I was interested in it, but that I didn't have that money. And then suddenly he said that some of my books had sold earlier, but that he'd had no recollection that like he hadn't sold them himself. He had no idea how or when it had happened, but he just said it's on the
oh,
record of them being sold, and he couldn't figure out when or how this had happened. And he said perhaps a genie sold it for you, just as a joke.
yeah,
But I had just come back from an experience where this genie said, go and get this ring and everything. So then it appeared, and it seemed like, I didn't have to sort of figure out about the money
yeah,
side of it. It was just sort of there. So
incredible. Yeah, and there's
yeah.
just another orb that went by you then.
Oh, that's
What
probably
was
dust.
oh, dust.
Yeah, there's dust around. Maybe I don't know. There's
Oh,
certainly fairies around, but yeah, I don't know. I
mm,
have caught some of these orbs before on camera while I've been playing some of their music because I will see
mm,
these flashing, bright white flashes of light that appear, and sometimes when I've been
mm,
bringing through their music, and so one of them I did catch on camera at one point. And when I zoomed in really, really close, it had a very clear face inside of it. And so that was what was interesting when you mentioned about the person who saw them turning into the gnomes
mm,
and things like that.
mm.
I think almost these can be traveling things. And actually, if you record the audio of these orbs and you listen to them really loud, they often sound like really strangely quite angry men shouting. I don't know why
Really?
that is. Yeah, but
Oh,
I've I've seen it
ah,
on multiple occasions. Like if I see them, I usually will turn the audio up and have a listen, and they're often quite scary sounding actually. But yeah,
oh,
but I'm not saying that's
yeah,
a universal thing, but it's happened to me
ye-
at least twice. So
yeah.
yeah,
And your music
yeah.
comes from the fairy realm, is
Some
that,
of it,
am I right? Yeah,
some
in
of it.
saying that.
So I've been making a lot of music for a long time, and I've got more than 48 hours of music that I've recorded in my life.
Mm,
But out of them, there's these three albums called The Lost Enchanters, and those three
yes.
albums come directly channeled from the fairy realm. So I go there, I meet these beings, and they play these songs, and I
Mm,
just learn straight from there and bring it back to the guitar and then record it. So they do all the lyrics, the music,
mm,
everything. Yeah.
mm, mm. And what's next for you, Jeremy? Where are you taking your work now?
Um, at the moment, I'm doing some very, very deep studies on the Grimm's fairy tales,
Mm,
and I'm basically finding where each of them fits on that fairy map, because there's a lot of visible and invisible parts of that map, and I'm unlocking some of the deeper codes on it. And the more you dig through going deep into those tales, the more the map starts to reveal hidden portals through the whole thing. So I'm absolutely
Mm.
obsessed with that because
Mm.
and it helps having been to the realms, because I can actually recognize when I'm reading the Grimm's tales what they're referring to, and often there's a parallel, whether they're talking about a real place that existed on this earth or not. There's often parallels in the fairy realms, and you can actually recognize where they are through having been there, connect it up to what's on the map, and then just through doing that, you'll have more information about the fairy tale itself. There
Mm.
could be a fairy tale, for example, that says that they saw a light appear in the woods and they went over to it and it led to a cottage. And if you were just reading that as a Grimm's tale, you would probably assume that a lantern or a light had appeared in somebody's house. They saw it in the distance, they walked up, and then they were led to the cottage. But because I recognized the location through having been in these fairy realms, I was able to pinpoint where this took place on the map. And it so happens to be where the will o' the wisps are. So then it tells me, okay, so they were following a will o' the wisp and it led them to that. So this is how, by combining it to the map, you can find out new information about these fairy tales that has not really been revealed before. So I'm writing all of these things down into a giant encyclopedia of information, but
Wow.
it could take a lifetime. I don't know how long it's going to
Oh,
take if I ever
wow.
get to the end of it.
That
Yeah,
sounds amazing. And the connection to cottages, I don't know what you've found out about
right.
cottages so far, but they are kind of like a fairy tale motif, aren't
Oh,
they,
right.
that come up
Yes, right.
a lot.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
I've I've been researching phantom cottages, so
Oh,
cottages that
wow.
people
Wow.
see in the landscape, and then they go back a few days later, and it's just a pile of rubble. And some people have actually spoken to
Wow.
inhabitants
Wow.
of these cottages, have
Amazing.
gone
Wow.
back, and
Hmm.
they haven't been there for years. Um,
Wow. Amazing.
and I've spoken to a couple of guests. Actually, I'm going to release this in the autumn as well. I'm going to do an episode about these cottages. A couple of my guests that I've spoken to have seen these cottages.
Hmm.
My guest that I've just released the episode 21, called Goblin Market, did an extra chat for my patrons, and she was speaking about being like having a fairy-led experience where
Hmm.
she went to this place that was a totally different season to, she it
Hmm.
was summertime, and then she was led to this glade that was earlier in the year. It was bluebells, and she also went through autumn as well. So she went through all these different
Wow.
seasons with a
Hmm.
friend, and they
Hmm.
saw a cottage and a little chapel, and they heard fairy music.
Wow.
So these cottages,
Fascinating. Yeah.
I'm wondering whether, are there any
Hmm.
cottages on the map, or
There are. There's a
yeah.
lot. Yeah. I don't know if they necessarily always call them cottages, but there certainly are. There's a lot of these upon the map. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
So,
they do call them cottages as well. There are some that are called that. Yeah.
so yeah,
Because it goes through
yeah.
all the nursery rhymes as well. So it'd be
Mm,
like Jack Horner's cottage and things like this. So
wow.
yeah, they have all of the different nursery rhymes through there, but each of them represent something symbolic. So they're all very strategically placed, and all of them
Mm.
are put next to each other for a reason, and each of them give more information about their surrounding parts. So yeah.
I can't wait to look at this.
Yeah, it's
Just
fascinating. There's quite an
yeah.
analysis on the Lost Enchanter site, and you can go quite deep on there. But I'm going much, much deeper in these book forms, but it's just going to take a very, very long time. There's a lot to
Yeah.
uncover.
So,
Yeah.
where can people find your books and your
Hmm.
courses? Where, you know,
So, yeah, so on the lostenchanters.com, it has all of my books and courses. The courses are completely free to take. So there's an 8-week beginner's guide to Fairyland course on there. And there's also a 12-day course on clairvoyance. Both of those are completely free. And I just have designed them through both of, yeah, well, yeah, it's in video format at the moment. But there's also the written format in my book Guide to Fairyland, which is my most recent one. It's probably the biggest one I've done so far, is 577 pages. And this has all of the the courses are in this book, and it also has the artwork of the fairies and things like that through there. And it has further in the back, there's all of the songs with all the lyrics and the guitar chords and things like that to play along to the songs. There's some references to the fairy map and how it matches up to all of the elemental books. And there's in the middle, there's also a collection of 22 fairy lessons, which I have compiled over a long period of time, which I would call more advanced. And so that's designed to be sort of done after those other two courses. And I don't have those ones online, mostly because I contacted a lot of different sort of witches and wizards and magicians around the world that I really have admired over the years. And I've received permission to use their work and sort of quote from some of the things in here, just because I wanted to create basically a collection of the most powerful techniques that I've ever experienced and put them all into one place. And because of that, I don't want to take it all out of context and put it all online with copyright things and everything, but they were okay with me putting these things in the book. So yeah, there's enough information on the Lost Enchanters to basically hear all of the fairy music, see the fairy artwork, do the fairy courses all for free. And there's also over 150,000 words on the site of just further analysis. There's all the techniques to go into the Jinn state, all of that stuff. But then the books are all on there too, if you want to delve deeper into my actual journeys to the fairy realms and the magic that comes with it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. I love your ethos.
Thank you too.
I love your
Thank you.
heart-centered approach to this work.
Likewise for yourself. Thank you.
Your generosity. You're one of the most generous-hearted people I know.
Thank you.
And your work, I can highly recommend your work. Everyone that's watching, listening to this, Jeremy's work is phenomenal. I've followed your fairy course and your clairvoyance course.
Thanks for taking the time to do those. I appreciate it, and I'm glad it led to these amazing experiences, even with this, seeing that symbol and everything. It's really confirming to me and really helps me to know that the information is doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm really glad about that. Yeah.
And I said to you, didn't I, that it really helped me through lockdown as well. So it gave me, because I'd started following this course, it was such a gift, because I started following the clairvoyance course beforehand and having these journeys and this information coming through, that then helped me during lockdown, because I had something to focus on and read to and think, oh, I could make these into meditations for people, because these have really helped me and now I want to help other people. So it all, what comes around goes around, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for being a wonderful guest, and
thank you for inviting me, and yeah, I appreciate it.
Lovely to finally be able to connect with you and talk with you, and